us are kind of stuck in that idea that we are attached to a name, and sometimes we like change our name and we say, okay, I'm not attached to that name anymore, that title, so call me this. And the name, the title, is really just a persona, which is like a mask. It's a cover, because really this thing doesn't really have a name. It can take on any name and any symbol, that you could think of, but when it comes down to it at the root, it's completely pure. And so we like to use these symbols to kind of enter into different realms, and that's kind of regulated through hieroglyphics in a way. And the system of hieroglyphics is in place, and we've all done our research on things like that. And so one of the ways that we can display the jurisdiction is with flags. And so it brings us back to kind of like being 5 years old again and thinking like, okay, well, like, yeah, this is our ship, we have these customs, so we're going to put up this hieroglyphic. So anybody who wants to come onto this ship, they know that we actually have certain customs. Some people have a custom. It's like you don't need to take off your shoes when you enter into the house. You don't need to do anything. It's already good. It's already perfect. Other customs is like, can you please take off your shoes when you enter in the house? So it's good if there was a symbol at the front door when you're entering into a new jurisdiction, so you know how to act accordingly. It's like that idea, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So that's why there's this system in place called admiralty. And a synonym for admiralty is maritime, which are both very interesting terms to denote jurisdiction. And a synonym for these words is that or a definition for it is that it's the law of the flag. And so if I have this symbol in this enclosed area, then it means that these customs are in place. And if you enter into this enclosed area, like let's say my court, or a courtroom, or to my house, and I've got these symbols up, and you don't bring any of your flags with you, well, then you're going to become subject to my jurisdiction, or the jurisdiction that is in this house. But if you were to bring a flag with you, then you would actually carry your jurisdiction wherever you go. And the court is actually designed like a ship. When you walk into that courtroom, first thing, it's shaped like a T. When you go straight in, there's the plaintiff on the left and defendant on the right. And it's actually, the T is actually just a cross, which is a symbol for balance. So you're just kind of going in there, you're actually having a tea party, believe it or not, because you're just going in there to achieve a balance and to basically celebrate the balance that's already existing. But when you go into that courtroom, there's some flags that are put in place, and there's a bar, just like there is on a ship. And when you cross that bar, you're actually entering into a world that goes by different customs. And if you don't have your hieroglyphic with you, and you can make up your own, or you can use the hieroglyphics that have already been put in place, like the U.S. flag or anything like that. If you bring your flag with you, this vessel becomes a representation of that flag. And just becoming a vessel that is operating for the benefit of us, you're actually exempt from arrest or seizure under Title 42 USC 30908. And so there's all these different codes. It's just like a video game. And once you recognize the codes of how the system works, your system that you built, that you're discovering, through your own self-exploration, you're going to recognize that actually it couldn't really be any other way. It's really already, it's in such a way so the highest respect can be given for all different cultures and customs and different methods of thinking, different ways of thought. So that's just a little bit about the courtroom and this world called Admiralty Maritime. Now, a couple interesting things about those words is maritime. The word Mary, the definition of the word Mary, or the name Mary, is star of the sea. And so you have time afterwards. So maritime kind of denotes an idea that we are operating in the time of the star of the sea. So again, we're falling back into myth again, like we had the money or the moony or the monetary system or the moonarchy, right? The key to the arc of the moon. Because we're just celebrating these mythologies just like the pagans did, and it's really all this paganism. It's this symbol worshiping idols that's all before us. And no one symbol is, more, important than any other symbol. They're all just symbols, and they all lean on one another, and they're dependent upon one another to live. And the reason why they're there is to act as a filter for the holy thing that has no word that can describe it, to express itself with itself. So an interesting thing about flags is that, yes, the way the system is designed, it's actually self-governing. That if you could actually publish your own laws and your own information and start from scratch, and those can be recognized based on publication through the system. And so it's like if we just kind of look out at the world and these little buildings that are being put up, and yeah, we can entertain the idea that's like, oh, this needs to change, and like, let's make this, the system just needs to completely change and be wiped out so we can go back to how things were when it was perfect, or we know it's perfect now, but we've been deceived and all this type of stuff. If we just kind of exercise acceptance and trust and just say, and exercise curiosity and say, maybe this thing, there's a little bit more to it than meets the eye, and maybe actually everybody is always doing their job all the time, and all I got to do is open my eyes and be curious and discover how it is that way, not to look and see if it is that way or not. So what we kind of have here in these cities is we have all these buildings that are put up, and it's kind of like a giant global board game that is put up, and there's all these different pieces that are put in place. There's a county, there's the cities, there's the state. There's this thing called the Internal Revenue Service, which publicly everybody hates, and it's this thing for the most part, you can talk to just about anybody, and they've got kind of a similar opinion about the tax system and the way it's structured. So how fooled do you think you have yourself with that structure? And could you actually imagine that Internal Revenue Service is actually existing within you right now, and it's something that you designed for a purpose, that you designed, and you're discovering why you designed it, and how it could actually work in your favor. And so, focusing more on the currency, the sea of current, that we have these pieces of paper that represent this value, right? This intangible value, but we have this matter that is moving around that represents this value. A lot of us will look outside of the world and we'll see that the world is wasting their raw materials, or we're not using them in the best way that we can. And so that may be a checking system that, well, geez, if I'm the one responsible for everything and I'm seeing that raw materials aren't being used to their fullest extent, maybe it's because of something that I'm doing, not something that somebody else is doing. Maybe it only has to do with me. And so when I see things a certain way, it just becomes that. And it always was that way. All I had to do was tune into it. So what's actually going on is we look at some pieces of paper differently than the others. We're actually paper racists for the most part. We look at some pieces of paper like Federal Reserve notes and we say, these things hold a value, but these other pieces of paper that we use in our transactions, they don't hold a value. Like, we can't go and take a receipt from, when we give our piece of paper and, we get some goods or service and then a receipt comes out of it, we can't go take our receipt and go to the grocery store and purchase goods with it. And so there's this idea that's put in place that, those pieces of paper, we can keep them on the side, but what use are they? And it's kind of a really old idea that's been set down in our mind, that we're thinking all pieces of paper aren't created equal. You'll notice on all your receipts, all your bank statements, and all your bills, there's no negative numbers. That all the numbers are actually positive, and on your receipt, there's actually the total value that was worth what you gave. And if you also notice that when you go and purchase something and you give a piece of paper always comes back. And sometimes you'll get two pieces of paper back when you give one. Sometimes you'll give two and you'll receive one. But you'll notice, in all, it will actually balance out. So one idea that we could start exploring is, how are these other pieces of paper used, and how can we convert the value of those things so we can actually use it to go ahead and buy goods or do whatever we want with. And that's actually done through the Treasury and the Internal Revenue Service. And the Treasury has a manual. For your Treasury, for us, there is a manual, and if you just read the manual, it starts teaching you how to account for your receipts. So actually, we've all been making tremendous amounts of value and money, but we've been discarding cards in the card game. We get the Federal Reserve notes, we know what to do with those. But when we get a receipt, it's kind of, we throw it to the side and we don't use it. So, of course, there's other people that are more seasoned in the card game that can play really good, because they can see any card in that, and when they get a hand, they're like, oh my God, I've got the best hand always, all the time. And that's actually what's going on. If you can just recognize that those other pieces of paper have equal value as the Federal Reserve notes, but there's a conversion process. And a really easy way for me to explain it is that if you were to work for somebody, and let's say you were like an independent contractor, you were to work for somebody, and you were to go do a job, you would go pay for your own gas and stuff like that, but you would save the receipts. So you can go give it back to the guy who hired you, and then when he gave the receipt or you gave the receipt to the person who hired you, they would pay you back. The system is set up exactly that way to work through the White House and through the treasury, all you kind of got to do is look into what they're saying about who they are. We could listen all day to what other people think about who they are, which is really all hearsay. And so if we're just listening to whatever other people think all the time, instead of going straight to the source and hearing the source say, no, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing. And when you actually begin looking into this thing that you have, again, inside your body called the White House, and it has some instructions to see how to go about managing the raw materials that are going through your hands every day. Because the piece of paper is actually timber, right? It's timber to be cut for the making of a contract. And that those symbols on the timber is minerals. So we have minerals and we have timber that are being passed around. And what we do is the way we perform, we kind of go and look out in the world, and if we see a broken world and we see a world that really that needs to be fixed, and we see a world that we're wasting raw materials, chances are there's something we're doing to where we're actually wasting the raw materials. We're not capitalizing on or recognizing the value that's actually passing through our hands every day. So